Welcome to this video about occupation licenses. Many of you will already know that it is necessary to have an occupation license in order to inhabit or reside in a property legally. What people are normally not aware of is that those occupation licenses expire. And this video is going to explain when it's necessary to have an occupation license, how you renew an occupation license, the importance of an occupation license, what it implies not to have an occupation license, where to get an occupation license, and the information necessary to provide the town council with. And I'm also going to show you how you can see what's required, the building code which relates to occupation licenses, and how you can tell if your property is going to meet those criteria, which is particularly useful if you haven't bought the property yet and you're looking to make an estimate of the amount of work that you need to carry out in order to make that property legal. Or if you're thinking about doing major works on a property, then make sure that they are compliant with the renewal requirements for any occupation licenses. So the CTE explains to you how something should be built. The design aspects of a property are contained within different laws. And those laws dictate things such as how a property should be spaced in terms of volume, in terms of lineal measurements, in terms of passing between one room and another, passageways, the width of a step, the height of a step, the maximum inclination of a ramp, the dimensions of a parking space. The CTE is a national legislation, and the legislation which controls design quality, which is the legislation which must be complied with for the occupation certificates, is autonomic. In the community of Valencia, that law is the ley, which is law number 3, which dates from 2004. In that legislation, in Article 2, it explains which properties it applies to and which it doesn't, and it applies to all dwellings. Article 32 is where it explains that it's applicable to not just to new buildings but to existing buildings, and it also explains in subsection 3 of Article 32, it explains that utilities companies are required by law to request a valid occupation license before opening a new contract or connecting the service to a house. Article 33 explains when you need an occupation license, under what circumstances. All new properties require an occupation license, and all existing properties, after a certain period of time, and that period is 10 years, are required to renew the occupation license if certain things happen. So if a property is transferred between owners and more than 10 years has passed or elapsed between the last time the property attained an occupation license, that license must be renewed. Also, if a property undergoes major works, structural works for example, then the property is also required to achieve another occupation license. Article 33 explains all the circumstances under which you're required to renew. Article 34 explains how to attain an occupation license. This is a municipal license, so it comes from the town council. A technical certificate is of compliance, proving that the property meets the conditions stated in the law, is required to be given with the request. A declaración responsable is a way of requesting a municipal permit or license. It means that you can undertake or begin to carry out an activity before the technical information has been provided to the council. It's like a promise that you make to the town council, stating that you have all the documentation that you need and that you will provide it to the town hall at a later date, and that you are making yourself responsible for any omissions or any mistakes which are made. Finally, there's another law, 161 from 1989, Article 3, which states that a technical certificate for occupation licenses are required to have a college stamp, a technical college stamp, a professional college stamp, unless they're signed by a municipal technician. Now, all of these reports will be signed off by a municipal technician. In the same way that a property which requires a regularization license is required to be compliant with the corresponding legislation at the date of its construction, rather than the most current legislation, the most up-to-date legislation. The requirements for your property to attain a second, what's called a second occupation license, second and posterior occupation license, the criteria depends on the date of construction. Pre-2009, it's HD 91, and post-2009, it's DC 9. Both HD 91 and DC 9 are just a long list of specifications, minimum requirements for living conditions. It isn't necessary to be a technician, an architect, or an engineer to understand those specifications. They're very simple. There has a minimum square meterage for a bedroom, a minimum square meterage for a bathroom, a space with no obstacles in the bathroom, a space with no obstacles in the front room, the maximum height for a step. Everything that makes a house livable in a comfortable way, a comfortable, safe way, is stipulated in those documents. There are some very helpful diagrams to help you measure areas and lineal measurements. So if you're interested in knowing whether the property you're about to buy meets these criteria, or whether the property you currently have will meet the criteria after the works that you're planning on carrying out, it is a simple process. You do not need to be a technician. There's nothing technical about it. All you need to do is look at the specification. If it says 9 square meters, then measure your house or the property you're interested in buying, and to see if it meets that criteria. The problems that you can find yourself with if you don't check this criteria are sometimes very difficult to solve. If, for example, you don't have the minimum clearance height, in some cases it can be impossible to raise the ceiling or lower the floor. Meeting this criteria, compliance with this criteria, is essential. I highly recommend checking compliance with occupation licensing criteria, part of your due diligence, and I mean your due diligence process, not leaving it in the hands of a technician, because most people don't. They simply buy with the help of a lawyer and just hope for the best. This is something you can do. If you're worried about not understanding the technical documentation because your Spanish isn't great, please watch my video on how to translate any webpage and any document into your language. A QR code will appear on the screen. Thank you very much for listening.